2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2, 3, 4, 9, 2, 3, 4, 10, 2, 3, 4, 11, 2. Oh, hey there! Welcome back to the DeFrancesco Music Store. I was just counting through my music that I'm practicing for my part with the triangle. You know, sometimes as a percussionist, you have to rest a really long time before you even get to do one thing like this. And I'm sitting there in the back as a percussionist and I'm thinking, I just have to wait and wait and wait, and there's a rest and then another rest and another rest, and really all I want to do is this. But I have to wait so long to do that. A lot of percussionists have to wait. Like, if you're playing the maracas, sometimes you get to do this. And then you rest for like 14 more measures. Or if you're playing the tambourine, you're just sitting in the back and you're counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then more rest and more rest. And finally, it's your big moment. And you get to, but you have to rest forever. Well, all of this resting made me think of today's Bible story. You know, David had a chance to try to focus his own timing into a situation, and instead he chose to show mercy and trust God. I'm so glad you joined us for another week of Heritage Kids at Home Edition. All right, let's dive into this week's story. Let's review our big picture question so we can remember to focus our minds on the important truth we have been learning. Read through with me our big picture question. How is Jesus the perfect king? And then read with me our answer. Jesus perfectly rules over the universe as the King of Kings. Friends, that means that Jesus isn't just a king. He's the king above all other kings. His rules and choices are always perfect in every way. He only does what is righteous and good. David was a good man and became a great king, but only Jesus is our perfect King of Kings. In the last couple weeks, we learned that when the Israelites wanted a king, God warned them before choosing Saul as their first king. Saul was disobedient, and as a result, God decided that Saul's family would lose the kingdom. Last week, we learned that God chose David to be king instead of Saul. God gave David the power to defeat Goliath and planned to make David a great king. But in our story today, Saul was still king and he hated David. Let's learn more by checking out this week's Bible story video. David showed mercy. Check it out.
David was hiding in the wilderness. He had served King Saul and won many battles. But now, Saul was jealous of David and wanted to kill him. Saul took 3,000 men and went looking for David. David and his men were hiding in the back of a cave when Saul happened to pass by. Saul decided to go inside. David's men saw Saul and said, "Look, God said he would hand your enemy over to you. This is the day. You can do whatever you want to him." David got close to Saul and secretly cut off the corner of Saul's robe. Saul didn't realize that David was there. David felt bothered about what he had done, and he told his men, "I won't fight the king. God chose him." So David did not let his men fight against Saul. Then Saul left the cave and went on his way. David left the cave and called to Saul, "My lord the king." Saul turned around and David knelt low before him. "Why do you believe people who say I'm trying to hurt you?" David asked. "See, God handed you over to me today in the cave. I had a chance to kill you, but I showed mercy." David showed Saul the corner of the robe that he had cut. "I have done nothing against you," David said. "God might punish you, but I will never harm you. Let God decide who is right and who is wrong. May he protect me from you." When Saul heard David's words, he cried. "You are more righteous than I," Saul said, "because you have done what is good to me, though I have done what is evil to you. Most people would kill an enemy, but you have let me go. May God reward you for your kindness." Saul realized God was with David, and he knew David would be the king of Israel. "Promise me you won't kill my family," Saul said. So David promised. Then Saul went home, and David and his men returned to their hiding place. David showed mercy to Saul, his enemy, because David trusted God's plan. Jesus also trusted his Father's plan. He died on the cross so his enemies could experience God's mercy and live forever as part of God's family.
Remember that from last week? That was the song, Only a Boy Named David. Only a boy named David, only a little sling. You should check it out with your family this week. But in our story today, even though David had served Saul loyally, Saul hated David. Saul was jealous of David's success, and he did not want David to be king. Saul wanted to be king, and he wanted his son Jonathan to be king after him. So he decided to kill David. Oh no! However, Jonathan and David were best friends, practically brothers. Can you think of a best friend that's like a brother or a sister to you? Well, Jonathan helped David escape from Saul, and David went into hiding. And that's why David was in a cave in the wilderness instead of living in a palace. God had promised that David would be king, but God did not promise that it would happen right away. While hunting for David, Saul walked into David's cave without knowing David was there. David's men suggested that God had provided a chance to hurt or kill Saul, but David made a different choice. He chose to show mercy to Saul. You see, David knew that God's plan and God's timing are best. David didn't want to hurt Saul, whom God had chosen as Israel's first king. And our story point for this week is that David showed mercy even though Saul hated him. When David approached Saul outside of the cave, he took a big risk. Saul might have said something like, "Who cares if you showed mercy? I'm still going to kill you," and called his army to attack David. But God protected David. Saul realized that his anger and hatred were wrong. Saul even agreed with God that David would be the next king. And that brings us to this week's Christ Connection. Can you think of how this story points to Jesus? David showed mercy to Saul, his enemy, because David trusted God's plan. Jesus also trusted his Father's plan. He died on the cross so his enemies could experience God's mercy and live forever as part of God's family. The Bible tells us that we are born dead in sin, enemies of God, When we trust in Jesus, we are given new life and adopted as sons and daughters of God. We go from being enemies of God to God's family. And friends, that is great news. Let's take a moment again this week and read together our key passage from Psalm 145, verse 13. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures through all generations. The Lord is trustworthy in all his promises and faithful in all he does. Our key passage explains to us that God's kingdom never ends. It will always exist because Jesus is our perfect King through all eternity. Let's read again our big picture question and answer. Read along with me. How is Jesus the perfect King? Jesus perfectly rules over the universe as the King of Kings. I'm so glad you were able to join us this weekend for Heritage Kids at Home Edition. Before we go, let's take some time to praise Jesus for the amazing King of Kings that he is with this wonderful hymn, Crown Him with Many Crowns. Sing along with me. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next weekend for Heritage Kids at Home Edition.